I would consider myself a classic liberal.
You would consider yourself a classic liberal?
Yes, although...
Which is also has beliefs attached, right? It comes out of a tradition of evolution of beliefs, but there is also a radical liberalism, isn't there, which feeds into feminism, which believes that progress is a better thing than lack of progress. I mean, the Economist is founded on those basics, and that people can argue about what they want to take or leave. But do you include then liberalism as one of the isms that you would say is in crisis at the moment, or has got itself into a mess?
Well, it depends to some degree, as you pointed out, on how you define liberalism. But one of the things that I like about the classic liberal take on the world, to which I think we owe Britain a great debt of gratitude for developing, perhaps more particularly than any other country, is that the individual is to be regarded as the sovereign entity in the political understanding. But that's not really a political claim. It's a claim that underlies politics. It's actually a theological claim. It's derived from the Judeo-Christian tradition. And because in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the suffering individual is the sovereign entity. And we established a political system based on that metaphysical axiom. And so I would say that to the degree that liberalism acts out the idea of the sovereignty of the individual, it's not an ism, it's not a political stance. It's far deeper than that, what it's predicated on. And the idea of the sovereignty of the individual is an idea that emerged with great difficulty over tens of thousands of years, or longer than that. It has an immense developmental history that radically predates, let's say, the Enlightenment or any articulated political beliefs. It's a far deeper notion than anything that can be encapsulated politically.
But if we look at some of the great classic liberals of the 19th century, and we look back to Mill, for example, you have individual liberty very strongly in there from Locke onwards, a sort of the sense of sovereignty, and no one from the monarch down has the right to unfair sovereignty over another man or woman. But you also have a strongly kind of progressive sense that develops as liberalism develops and takes you towards women's franchise, towards, actually in Mill's case, a fairly out there feminism. If J.S. Mill was sitting here instead of me, would you be seeing eye to eye on whether that was a good idea?
Well, again, I think it depends on what you mean by feminism. I mean, the idea that it would be a good thing for the world to arrange itself so that the talents of women were as available to use by the collective, let's say, by the group or by society as the talents of men, then obviously that's all for the good. I don't have any problem with that whatsoever, because talent's in short supply, and it's a foolish society that wastes it no matter where it manifests itself. Racial divisions or ethnic divisions or any of that, equality of opportunity. I can't see how you can be a sensible person and not possess...
Do women have opportunity? Do women have equality of opportunity then broadly across Western societies?
Compared to what?
Compared to not having equality of opportunity.
Well, compared to 100 years ago, yes. Compared to 50 years ago, yes. Compared to most places in the world throughout history, yes. Compared to a hypothetical ideal, no. But
would
that
very, very
hypothetical
leery. Ideal be a good ideal or a bad ideal?
Well, it depends on how you define equality. If you define it as equality of outcome, then it's a catastrophic ideal. See, this is something too. One of the things I've been struggling with recently is the idea of boundaries, let's say. We know absolutely, and this is relevant to your questions on progressivism, we know that the left can go too far, and we know that the right can go too far. I mean, I would say that's the abject lesson of the 20th century. Both can go too far. And we kind of know when the right goes too far. We probably think the right goes too far, if you had to boil it down to one thing, when people start making claims of racial or ethnic superiority. That seems to be the marker. But we don't know when the left goes too far. And the left, to be frank about it, isn't very careful about differentiating itself into those who are pursuing a reasonable progressive agenda and those who have seriously gone too far. And I would say that when people push an equality of outcome agenda, they've gone too far. Even though it's not as blatantly horrifying, let's say, as claims of ethnic or racial superiority, the consequences of playing that idea out in the world are seriously not good.
But surely they are, they're two kind of doorstops at the far ends of the arguments. I mean, very few people, I think, on the left, and there would be some who would advocate for absolute equality of outcome and everything it would take to achieve that.
It's not so clear to me
Similarly,
that that's a minority
you know,
view.
there may be lots of things that are wrong both on the left and on the right that don't involve the right being overtly racist and the left wanting absolute equality of outcome. It's a space surely in the middle that matters, and that's why I suppose people feel that sometimes your argument is almost sort of, it's driving towards picking the fight rather than liberalism would, I suppose, encourage you to take the best, and we can have the argument about what's the best and what's the worst of everything that's in between.
No,
I
think that the left poses a far greater danger than your analysis suggests. I certainly see this in the universities. And the drum is being beat very, very hard, perhaps not so much here, but in North America, for equality of opportunity or equality of outcome under the rubric of equity. And equity is essentially a doctrine that fosters the notion that equality of outcome is not only desirable, but should be pursued as an object or as an explicit aspect of public policy. The idea being that if there isn't equivalent representation of all possible groups at all possible levels of all possible hierarchies, that indicates a tyrannical prejudice that needs to be rooted out. And that's having an absolutely pernicious effect on institutions, especially educational institutions in North America. It's an increasingly widespread view, and I think it poses far more danger than you think.
Is it possible that views become more attractive when something is dissatisfied and when aspirations have not been met, which are reasonable aspirations to have, and you can then say that the answers are wrong or that they distort.
Sometimes.
But so I was trying to say, if this is such a popular view, to cite your example on campuses in North America, it may be that there's something out there that existing society has not satisfied.
What hasn't satisfied the ever-present human tendency towards envy and resentment. That's for sure.
So that's all that's driving it.
Not all, but it's a tremendous amount of what's driving it, and an absolute lack of gratitude for what we've managed to accomplish and what we have in front of us. I mean,
unfairness, does that figure?
Well, unfairness is a very ill-defined term. I mean, it's not so obvious either. It's not so obvious what's fair. So, for example, I got embroiled in a dispute the last time I was in the UK about the issue of the gender pay gap. And, from a social science perspective, the idea of the gender pay gap is it's so poorly formulated that it's almost staggering to me that people can even conceptualize it in this manner. It's not a univariate problem. It's a multivariate problem. Men and women don't make the same amount of money. So we can break it down and
then we can go through the
not only could we have to.
Good.
And we can't assume that just because in all situations women don't make as much money as men, although there are some situations in which the reverse is true, by the way, that the reason for that is prejudice and oppression. There's many reasons for it. One reason, so there's a book by Warren Farrell, for example, called Why Men Make More, and he outlines like 42 reasons why men make more money than women. One of them is that men are much more likely to take dangerous occupations.
Well,
let's
have a go,
if
if not at 42, at some of the reasons, but perhaps just